Hello, everybody. So one space that I've been wanting to invest in for a few years now is the genomics space, and we've kind of forgotten about that revolution. That's why I'm calling it the forgotten revolution. It's the one that is the least discussed in investing circles because, if we don't work in the field or if we don't have the diseases that this field of science treats, then we're not impacted. And it's easy for investors to do a whole life in investing and entirely forgetting about it. But if you go back in time and you look at, say, the biotech moves in the 80s and the early 90s, fortunes were built in biotech, and that second wave of medical treatments, which was a move from pharmaceutical, based on compounds in nature, drugs based on compounds in nature, to a move of a biotechnology where you use, say, viruses and you change something into the virus, and then you have a miraculous treatments. And so, I've told you in a prior video, I was lucky to have ridden AbbVie all the way up when they had their blockbuster drug called Humira, and that investment went so well for me that now I'm actually still very interested in getting back into the health field, because I know that you can have a winner in this field if you find the right company, the right horse to bet on. There can be tremendous winners. And I believe CRISPR Therapeutics at this point may be a winner, but it's tough to invest in these companies because they are hard to understand and they are complex and there's a lot of moving parts to them. So let me just try to introduce you to CRISPR Therapeutics if you're interested. So CRISPR Therapeutics, they made the news in December 2023 all over the internet, all over the world really, because they got their first FDA approval for a cure, a permanent cure. One therapy, one treatment gives you a permanent cure for sickle cell disease, And if we are not familiar with sickle cell disease, it impacts 100,000 Americans, and it's bouts of debilitating pain. CNBC actually has this article talking about a certain Mr. Goodwin, and he explains that it's you have to go to the hospital maybe 20 times in the month sometimes because the pain is just so much. And of course, the about 100,000 Americans in the US that have sickle cell disease, they want to get it treated. They obviously want to get it treated. And as Goodwin says, he really wants to get it treated, but the problem is it costs $2.2 million for the treatment. It's a brand new treatment. It's made in one manufacturing facility in Massachusetts, and it's brand new. It's top of the line, and obviously people are rushing to get it. People are rushing to get this treatment because it's wonderful. A condition that you would have had your whole life, all of a sudden, one therapy, and it could be gone. That's the promise of gene therapy. And by the way, I shouldn't say could, because it got FDA approved, so it's not could anymore, right? It seems to be working per what the FDA says. And of course, because it's so expensive, if you go down in the article, you read seeing things like, employers are taking notes. Many employers are looking at gene therapies and they're looking at their cost, and they're saying, well, if you just have one employee in your workforce that has to have one of these treatments, then it makes you have no more return on insuring your employees. Essentially, it exceeds the entire cost of the entire population of insured employees in the company if you just have one of those treatments to give to somebody. So employers are looking at their health plans and they're removing that disease, that treatment from the health plan. And of course, the government's not happy about that, because the government's like, well, wait a minute, we got to help out the people. And that's obviously the problem with insurance. That's the problem with insurance. Like, insurance is great as long as you have diabetes or something, or pre-diabetes, and you need metformin, and it's $20 or $30 a month. Doesn't cost that much on society. Like, insurance is all nice and great for that. But whenever you have like a permanent cure to an actual major problem, then all of a sudden there's nobody to pay. But this is where it gets so complex, and this is why investors stay away from these companies, because they just assume it's going to be hard for them to get payment for their products, and they just assume that people are not going to pay or the government is going to intervene. Definitely a complicated investment story, but it's an international market. And so when you have a drug approved in the United States, typically other countries follow really quickly. And in the case of sickle cell disease, the US actually has a larger average population than average, that has this more than Europe. Europe only has about 50,000 people who have sickle cell disease, but it's a genetic disease. And guess what? There is one country in the world that has more of this disease than just about every other country, and it is Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis literally approved CASGEVY, which is the sickle cell disease therapy. They literally approved it 20 days after the US approved it. Literally, it took 20 days. And the Saudis are extremely excited about it if you research about this, because it seems like there's about 1 million Saudi Arabians who could be eligible for the treatment right now. So in other words, sickle cell disease is 10x more prevalent in Saudi Arabia than it is in the United States with 100,000 people. And so if you do just a quick back of the napkin math, and I realize that as they ramp, this drug will obviously not cost $2.2 million as they ramp. You know, it's the first batch that costs this much money. This will get more and more affordable as you ramp, of course. But if you do that very basic, simple back of a napkin math, you get into numbers that stop making any sense really quickly. It's kind of like talking about Tesla and talking about Optimus Bot and making simple calculations on the Optimus Bot, and then you realize you just stop making sense right away. Well, this is the same thing. I do the same little calculation, take the number, take how many people, and I'm getting $2.42 trillion in potential revenue, $2.53 trillion in potential revenue if you have Europe, USA, and Saudi Arabia. Okay, granted, most of it comes from Saudi Arabia. But, you know, and there will be other countries, of course, that approve this drug. And so if governments start paying this level of price for the drug, you really quickly get into the trillions of potential revenue. Now, granted, this revenue would be shared with their partner. They have Vertex Pharmaceutical, CASGEVY as Vertex Pharmaceutical and CRISPR Therapeutics partner on it. And of course, it's not going to be 2.2 million forever, but you can see how you could get to companies that could get to absolutely tremendous size. You know, CRISPR is only a $6 billion company, and they have a product that could literally change the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we're talking about things that are more meaningful than getting a better car. You know, a Tesla is wonderful, it's a much better car than everybody else. But you know what? It's not as meaningful as gaining your life back because you get a disease cured. And so, you know, even though this price may seem shocking, you know, is it really that shocking in the sense that, of course, it's a temporary price, but maybe you get into that nexus, you know, maybe you get into, you know, 75, 80 years old and you have a disease and you need it fixed right away, because to you can't wait 5 years for the cost to become affordable. You value your time, so you can't wait 5 years for the cost to be affordable, and you need that treatment today. You need it now, and so you end up getting the treatment when there is these bottlenecks, these tremendous bottlenecks of production of the drug. Speaking of which, and this is, you know, this is something, as you know, on this channel, I'm not a big fan of moats. You know, I prefer innovation to be widespread. I think it creates more value for the pie as a whole. I'm not a moat lover. I'm not a Warren Buffett type of investor. But if you love moats, you know, if you look at CRISPR, listen to a few conference calls from them, it's very clear to me that, of course, there are patents on the technology, but what's more important than patents is the processes, and those processes are kept secret. And in their case, it's kept secret in a single facility, and you can bet that they're going to have some pretty intense security at these types of facilities. So a lot of companies now, because their patents have been infringed on by for foreign nations, foreign countries, but also people locally just copying your patent, and then you have a lawsuit, and of course you're likely going to win your lawsuit, but it takes 5 years. So by the time you win the lawsuit, the business is gone anyway. So a lot of companies are using secrets, trade secrets nowadays, and manufacturing secrets, right? That's one of the reasons. If you take AbbVie, for example, Botox, it's in the public domain, but nobody knows how to make it because they never made the they never made the processes public. So this could be kind of a thing where this is a company who could keep its advantage for a very long time if they keep their processes, their learning advantages internal to the firm, and they just have to ramp it. They just have to scale it. So I just wanted to put this out there for this company if you like moats. Now, keeping in mind, so I told you the potential of let's call it 2.5 trillion on this, and of course that's back of a napkin math. It's going to be less. I just want to point out it's going to be less. But what else could you treat with CRISPR-Cas9? What else could you do with this breakthrough CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology? What else could you do? Well, they have a pipeline, right? All healthcare companies have a pipeline, and you can look different diseases. It seems like they're making quite a bit of progress in blood cancers. So this is what they would call their ex vivo type of procedure, where you would treat you would filter the blood, and you would treat the blood externally in a machine, and you could treat things like leukemia. I don't know the numbers of leukemia, but it's huge. It's tremendous, and of course, leukemia is oftentimes a deadly disease, and so. If you have a deadly disease, would you pay $2 million to save your life? That's kind of a question here that you have to ask. We save in 401ks for a nice house when we get 70, 80 years old. Maybe one doesn't want a nice house. Maybe one wants to make sure they can delete cancer on one of their kids, maybe, or that kind of stuff. Likely, actually, if you ask me. And then you also have this, which is I think. Again, the numbers make even less sense. This is like you're watching a Tesla Optimus video. So let me have my little Tesla Optimus bot video moment for you. In the latest call for this company, one of the analysts asked. The CEO discussed type 1 diabetes, and they're working. You can see type 1 diabetes. They're at the clinical phase of a one-time treatment, one-time therapy against type 1 diabetes. And that analyst asked a great question. I would have asked the same question, by the way. Hey, CEO, hey there, you said type 1 diabetes. It's interesting. Yeah, it's all nice, type 1. But the first question that analyst was, what about type 2? And the CEO answers, well, yeah, type 2 is coming up next. Type 2 will be in our pipeline at some point, but the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, kind of needs us to start with type 1 in their processes, and if they find a cure for type 1, then they will attack type 2, which out of decency, I did not do the calculations as to how much money a permanent cure for type 2 diabetes would be. Out of decency, I didn't want to write the numbers on this, but I just figured I would simply write how many people have type 2 diabetes. 38 million in the USA, 27 million in Europe, 141 million in China, 74 million in India, 15 million in Brazil, 15 million in Mexico. Type 2 diabetes is literally, along with heart disease, like the top ailment. Like it's the plague of modern day society. And you have a company who could have a gene therapy for type 2 diabetes. Like I said, the numbers, when you start putting numbers into this, it just doesn't fit in any spreadsheet. These are revolutions that are very, very, very hard to fathom And the analysts actually have tried to imagine what just sickle cell disease, just that permanent therapy against sickle cell disease. Because of that, they're predicting 600% revenue growth over the next 12 months with a 65% gross margin. And of course, I've never ever, I mean, this is pharmaceuticals, and it makes very little sense, I suppose, to think like that. But 600%, I don't really know what that means. What that means is they go from not a lot to a very large number, typically. But you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt. But a 6x in sales, well, technically it could be way more over the long term. Over the next 10 years, what are the sales going to be? Makes very little sense to put a number on this. Needless to say that I think enterprise value over sales of just 14, I think is very reasonable for a company that like this, that cures major diseases. And I actually, I'm trying to take exposure for the long run in my portfolio. And so what I did today is I bought January 2026 $30 calls on ARK Genomics because there's a lot of fascinating companies in there. CRISPR, from what I've seen, is the more interesting company. But for example, Exact Sciences, which is a detection company to detect cancer with stools, is fascinating. Twist Bioscience is fascinating. Ginkgo is actually very interesting, even though that stock has been left for dead. I mean, I pretty much find so many of these companies very interesting, aside from maybe Teladoc. But in my last Teladoc video, what did I say about Teladoc? I said, if you're a value investor, I can't really blame you. Teladoc is just not. I don't think it's going to 10x, but I don't think it's going anywhere either. It's just dead money. So when I look at the holdings, I really like the holdings. And when you look at all of the other ETFs in that space, they're not $1 billion plus ETFs. They're just teeny tiny ETFs with no volume, no trading. Like the big ETF in the field is Cathie Wood's ETF. And so I found that the January 2026 $30 calls on ARKG are very reasonable. And that's how I've opened the position on this. And I'm hoping that by 2026, it is clear that genomics is the way of medicine, is the way of sick care, because by 2026, we should have more than just sickle cell disease. I mean, what if we have a gene therapy for leukemia? Everybody knows how awful is leukemia. Everybody knows that, especially when it's in younger people. Like this is something I believe most insurance, most governments will pay for that. It's like so what, and a lot of people are gonna pay for sickle cell disease. Saudi Arabia, like I told you, when it's literally the plague in that country because of genetics, we have 1 million Saudis in there who could be eligible for a treatment. You bet there's people in Saudi Arabia who are gonna be paying 2.2 million, and if you have an insurance plan in Saudi Arabia that are gonna be paying this much money. Right. So I'm feeling confident in having a little exposure to ARKG, and this is a space that I want to study more and spend more time on the channel. You may have noticed, by the way, on this channel that I've been talking more and more about health stuff, and there's more and more health stocks, it's there's a reason for that. I've gotten very interested in this space as of recently. I think there's tremendous potential. Let me conclude with a few general thoughts. This is not stock specific thoughts, although I will bring up HIMSS in a second in this. So I have fundamental thoughts in health insurance, what I should really call sick insurance or sick care insurance, because I want to make a distinction between health and actually solving a disease. I think the regular quote-unquote healthy person also have health needs, and these health needs should be addressed. But too often insurance doesn't cover regular day-to-day, your average 30-year-old health needs. Most often, traditional health insurance plans doesn't focus on that. They only focus on the cases that are more advanced, that are more dire. So that's why I always like to distinguish the both. Like for example, if you pay $600 or $700 in health insurance, how come the gym membership is not covered? Like as a simple example, gym membership should probably be covered. Things as simple for health like condoms should likely be covered by insurance. I'm talking about very simple things that should be covered by health insurance, and it's not covered, of course, because health insurance is actually sick insurance. It's insurance for people who are ill. It's not insurance for people who want to live a healthy life. And so anyways, I want to just put that out there. But insurance works really well, like I said, when you gotta prescribe procedures that are not too expensive, like metformin, maybe a statin, maybe a stent, right? You're gonna get a stent. It's something every cardiovascular surgeon knows how to do that, not too expensive. Insurance stops working or starts breaking whenever there's breakthroughs in medicine. That's why I believe there's going to be a breakage in insurance, because we're going to see more and more breakthroughs. We're going to see more and more FDA-approved therapies for very, very, very complicated conditions. And then you're going to have insurance plans who are going to find a million ways to cover them, which is why I think that the culture is going to have to change, where people are going to have to understand that if you want to get the treatment for cheap, there's really only one way to do it, is to wait for that treatment to become mainstream. And if you want it right away, I don't know what you're going to do, because, for sickle cell disease, in that case, they have one manufacturing facility, and you're competing with people in Saudi Arabia that want it. You're competing with people in Europe that want the treatment. You're competing with everybody that wants the treatment. The whole world wants it. There's only one facility that makes it. So how are you going to do it? Right, the price here at $2 million, the price is a function of the anticipated demand. Because if you price this at $1,000, then it's obvious that every single person in the world are gonna want to have that treatment. They're gonna want it right away now, obviously. So imagine that. What if you have a permanent cure for type 2 diabetes or for cancer? Is $2 million going to be worth it for that? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is yes. Yes, it's going to be worth it. You see people spending $2 million on a not so nice house in Los Angeles, California, right? Maybe you prefer to have a treatment. The cost will obviously go down with time and scale, but like I said, if you have a disease today, if you have cancer today, if you're in pain from sickle cell disease, if you're in tremendous pain today, you likely want the treatment today, which means that these prices that make you go in front of the line is kind of what you have to pay. And I think there's going to be maybe a societal shift where individuals accept to save for their future medical expenses, right? Because today we've accepted, at least in the United States, I know in Europe it's a little more controversial thing to say, but in the United States, we have Social Security in the US, and you're going to get, $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month when you retire with Social Security, if you're to the max, and most people are nice and happy with that, but we've all accepted that we need to save for retirement on top of that, because we've all accepted that Social Security is not enough. And so maybe health insurance, health security, we also need to accept that it may not be enough, because the treatment that you may want when you're in your 70s may not be may not be able to be afforded by health insurance. That treatment may only be able to be afforded if you have a 401k type saving mechanism where you can save that $2 million just in case, if you're 75, you have cancer, you want to get that therapy to turn off cancer, right? That's kind of the way I think the health is headed. And this is obviously, if you follow me and if you followed HIMSS, you know that this is obviously the HIMSS thesis to health, which is they are operating entirely outside of the health insurance. Because if you don't have a major health issue, if you just have tiny things, teeny tiny things that annoy you, like you're losing your hair and you're annoyed by that, right? The health insurance is not covering that. They're not covering hair loss, right? But yet you don't feel good because you look at yourself in the mirror and you lose your hair, and it has a psychological impact, but that's not going to be covered. So people are taking matters into their own hands, and they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to cover it myself. HIMSS went through this because they didn't have a choice. Maybe you're going to be in a situation where a lot of these treatments are not going to have a choice. And if you follow a lot of this longevity space, which I've been following for a very long time, things like the Peter Diamond, let me write the names for you, like the Peter Diamandis is very big of the world, or is very big on that, Peter Diamandis, but also David Sinclair. If you if you follow these people on longevity and the things that they do, it's very, very clear that the treatments that we're going to have in 5, 10, 20 years are not going to be able to be covered by insurance, right? Or we need to move into a system where a health insurance company is not a for-profit company anymore, but something else. I don't know, but it's clear that if you want to have the best care, in my view, it's going to have to be outside of insurance. And I'll conclude this quote with, I'm a big Bitcoin bull. Obviously, Bitcoin is my biggest position, and so there is not a Michael Saylor podcast that I haven't listened to. And I remember Michael Saylor a few years back talking about health in one of his tangents on a podcast, and he said, I was a good candidate for that surgery because I'm a billionaire and I could pay. Right? I was not going to be a good candidate for the surgery that was going to make my life much better if I could not pay because it was not covered by insurance. But because I was a billionaire and I could pay, I was a good candidate for that surgery. And are we moving into a world where you're going to be a good candidate for sickle cell disease because you either A, you can pay, or B, you have an insurance that pays for you, or you live in a country that pays for that, right? It's kind of crazy, and I also think sickle cell disease, and I conclude that CRISPR developing sickle cell disease, that was very, very smart for them to go after a disease that is extremely common in Saudi Arabia, which is a very, very wealthy country, a very wealthy country. And so I'm curious to see what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia with that drug. So anyways, this was not investment advice, no financial advice. This is obviously entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.